As we talk about the impact of social media, Karen, I know you've been involved with quite a number of clients now that have found themselves under assault on social media. And of course now I think are working with even others to help them anticipate what the negative impact of certain social media efforts might be so they can get out ahead of it and try to mute that impact. You know, it used to be that when we talked about communication, we talked about having a core message and understanding what your message was, how that message was an amplification of really the elements of what mattered most to what you were trying to do with whatever enterprise you were leading. Has the role of message changed in your mind, given in the social media environment? Are some of the things that always were true about effective communications as true as ever? Or are there adjustments that have to be made now as we think about the rapid fire impact that comes about because of social media?
Well, I like to say that while the channels have changed dramatically, that over the course of my career, I don't think the fundamentals of effective communication have really changed. I think those are still really important, but the channels have changed dramatically, and the channel may change the appropriateness of the message. So, for example, a clear message that you would deliver via a news release will not be delivered at all the same way on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter. I like to say when I started my career as a television reporter, the headline was really important in the newspaper because that was often the news story that the local television would cover that night, and that was the most watched source of news when I started my career. Today, the headline's often the most important for an entirely different reason, and that's because the headline is often the only thing that is shared on Twitter. And so I think we have to think about it. It's become more complicated. We have to think about how do we deliver that clear, consistent message with conviction and compassion consistently, and how do we do it tailored for the channel that we are using in which to communicate.
That's very helpful, and I think very important to understand what still holds in terms of how we communicate most effectively. It's very useful. You know, as we talk about social media, we have to talk too about traditional media. This presidential campaign, this campaign overall, was a tough one for traditional media in the United States. Public trust, according to a recent Gallup poll, says that the public, only 32%, I think, of the public actually trusts the traditional media as a credible source for information. Certainly, given some of the projections and predictions about how the election would come out in the media that were different than what turned out to be the case, have not helped in terms of their media. And of course, as we know, they're under a lot of pressure from their business models as things are changing dramatically in that regard. I wonder, given all of this, is what we advise our clients about how to deal with traditional media changing? And what kind of lessons are there to be taken from what's happening in the traditional media realm about how we should approach what we do for clients there?
Well, traditional media is still important, and we're always going to, at least people like you and me, Don, I suspect, are always going to want to look at the newspaper headlines and see what the major media is determining to be the important news of the day. But what we need to recognize is that's not nearly enough in today's day and age. What our clients need to know is not only who is talking about them and who is sharing news about them, but who is influential in that conversation. So what journalists are people following? What bloggers? What food critics? Tailored to an individual's area of expertise. Who is that person following? Who do they listen to? Who are their circle of friends? And we have analytics that can show, what publications are most influential for a certain group of people. What bloggers do they tend to listen to? I actually was involved in a recall situation with a client, and we were able to watch conversation on Twitter and Facebook, and decide when to intervene and with whom based on the volume of that conversation, how influential was it, how rapidly was it spreading, and therefore should we engage or not? Because one of the problems, as you know, with social media is there's so much. The volume is incredible. There's so many tweets. But how do you analyze that, determine which ones are having an influence or not, and therefore when do you need to engage or not is one of the most important, I think, decisions that companies have to make.